Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Where It All Began. I am very, very excited for today's guest, Mr. Charlie Murphy. Charlie and I got to work together I believe it was junior year of high school when I attended the Performing Arts Project, which was a 2 week long summer intensive in North Carolina. And he was one of the coaches that they had brought in. And he is so amazingly talented. He is so nice. He knows a lot about the college audition experience. And he's just such a great, amazing, caring human being. So I will get right into the interview to find out from Charlie where it all began.
I
How are
like your brick
you?
wall. I'm good. I'm good. Crazy. Life's crazy, as
Yeah.
always. But I have a 4-year-old, so it's insane, and I'm double dutying, just work and
Yeah.
all the parenthood, and it's a wild time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I remember, because she was pregnant during right when she was in Jagged Little Pill, right? Because she was
Yep.
pregnant or she was breastfeeding at the Tony Awards. Because I remember
Breastfeeding
one
at
of you
Tony.
posted about that, and I was like, oh, that's iconic. So
It's a pretty rare thing because, like, you just wouldn't choose to have a baby while you're in the middle of a show, except for COVID. Like,
right,
we're like,
right,
okay, so we have a 5-week-old baby, and she's about to go into the show.
yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
crazy.
So welcome to Where It All Began. Thank you so much for being on. I'm so excited to be talking today. It's been several years since we've chatted. I think I was a junior in high school when I did the Performing Arts Project, and we worked together. And so I'm so excited to kind of be catching up and hearing your story after getting to work with you.
Me as well.
Um, it's like we were talking about before. My goal is to kind of bring to light the people who helped us when we needed it most. The people who are kind of in the shadows that don't always get the spotlights. The Tony Awards, we hear the producers, the agents, the managers.
Hmm.
But I want to get down to the nitty gritty and know who your third grade teacher was that really helped you through your music classes and stuff like that. So hopefully we can give some of those people behind the curtain a shout out. So if you're ready, I'm ready to jump right
Let's
in.
do it. I'm ready. I'm pumped. I'm excited. I'm honored, even, CJ. Honored.
Awesome. So you were born in Pittsburgh. Were you in a small town in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I was in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, so like the North Hills, like Wexford,
Okay.
Pennsylvania. But the suburb of Pittsburgh, still 20, 22 minutes away, depending how fast you drive
Yeah.
to Pittsburgh. So sort of connected to the city, but in its own little suburb.
Yeah. So how do you feel kind of the smallish town roots kind of influence your journey into theater? Was there a lot of outlets and access for you to get involved?
I think plenty of access. I mean, I think I grew up in a wealthy enough area, and public schools are really good. The arts community was really good. I think it's like a different problem from the suburban world. Is like there's some places where I feel like you come from where you can imagine no kind of access or no, what could it even be to be on Broadway? I think the sort of suburban feel was more like, am I interesting enough? Do I have the whatever the sort of artistic joie de vivre to be like, hey, can I, do I have something to say? Do I have a pain or whatever the sort of things that we were worried about in the 90s as I was growing up? Sort of like, what would I bring to it, as opposed to sort of my boring suburban lifestyle? Like, we did our musicals. There was plenty of sort of support, but I think, when we pictured like gritty New York theater, the question was, did we have enough? Did we have enough grit for it almost?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel that kind of being from a smaller town shaped how you approach your career or the way that you viewed like the theater world?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a feeling of like, which I think everyone feels if you don't happen to have, like, if you're not an Epo baby, if you don't have like lots of industry connections, I definitely felt the like, I don't know what this is. My parents are both professors, but like, a law professor and a science professor. So they sort of understood the college world and going, you're going to get an education. But as soon as I talked about arts, they were like, I don't know what that is. What do you mean? Is that something people do for a career? Like, do you mean like Hollywood star? Like, it was very hard for them to sort of comprehend what this could be. So I felt a little bit of that, like from the outsider perspective. It helped. Like, I ended up going to Carnegie Mellon, which I think helped in terms of the connections that I was able to find there. But I think before that, I would have felt sort of like, yeah, New York felt very far away, even though it's not, I guess, that far away by car, but felt very far away in terms of like that whole world compared to where we grew up.
Was New York your always your goal, or did you just want to be involved in the arts in some capacity?
I mean, I guess since I was 16, I think New York was always the goal. Uh, yeah, I think I've had very much that, like, I got to get out of here, got to get out,
Hmm.
got to find my purpose, whatever. Write your musical sort of for the what
Yeah.
my dream was at 16 to sort of see, even though I was not specifically musical theater by then. I wanted to be an actor, but I wanted to, do cool, gritty plays that were going to change the world was sort of how I felt at 16,
Hmm.
17. And I just saw that happen in New York. Now I would understand a little more. I'm like, oh, that could happen in a lot of different places. But growing up where I did, I was like, New York is the place that you go to make that happen. All my friends wanted to go to New York. We were all going to meet up there after college. That was sort of the plan from jump.
Yeah. So how did you kind of get involved in theater? What was your first experience, either on stage or backstage, that made you just fall in love with it?
It's a great question. I mean, I've been asked that before, and I don't know which one to highlight. Like, I feel like I did like this weird summer camp production of Peter Pan, where like I was originally playing. I don't actually remember who my original. Well, I was like so young. I was like 6 or 7, and the person who was playing Captain Hook like had to leave camp or whatever. So I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm like take on this like basically improvised version of Captain Hook in like 2 days. So I have such a strong memory of that and really loving it, and being like, but I sort of saw it more as like a game or a challenge. Like this was super fun to be like, can I learn this thing in 2 days and do it? And I was very proud of my 7-year-old self or whatever I was then. But then I didn't really do it through middle school, through elementary school, middle school. I was a sports person, still am, I guess, a sports person, but I was much more focused on baseball. And, also my parents were like working. So they weren't like, we couldn't do a lot of activities. It was like, you can do the activities that I can manage and one activities at a given time. And so I didn't really start it up again until high school. Did my high school musical. Was part of this cool program in Pittsburgh called Act One. I guess so. By 8th grade, I did another like show through them. But I can't say there's a singular like high school experience where I knew for sure I was going to do it. I did the high school musicals. I really enjoyed it. But around 15, 16, I sort of started falling a little bit more in love. And I think really what transitioned it for me is I think my introduction to theater was almost completely musical theater, which I love. I run a company called Musical Theater College Auditions. I like music theater plenty. But when I really found the not musical theater of it all, which eventually would become Shakespeare for me, but at the beginning was much more like, oh, like what is a play? Like a non-singing play? Because I think I always felt like I felt very moved by musicals, but then the experience of like the place felt so much more real to me and felt like, oh, this is something I can dig into. And that felt like this is how I can express myself. And I think because I didn't have in plays my own limitations of like how good of a singer or dancer I am, which would make me self-conscious. By how good I mean how not good I am at the musical theater of it all. That like for me to be like, oh, I can actually like I remember playing like Lenny in Rumors. Rumors is like this kind of crazy farcical comedy. And I was like, oh, I can kind of use all of my facility as a person and I can just be truthful without having to think about like, okay, but is that sounding good? And then is my dance correct? Like it's just for me. Once I was released from that part of it, I felt like, oh, now this is something I really could see myself doing at a high level and could see myself pursuing.
Hmm. So you were really living the Troy Bolton High School Musical, like sports and theater life in high school, trying to manage
For
both.
sure, for sure. I mean, definitely didn't look like High School Musical in my experience, but yeah, that was. I like I never saw myself really being a professional athlete. I think I was like good enough. Like I got lightly recruited from like junior colleges level. Like so, it was like I would have been good enough to play in college, but definitely not professionally. And it was just like a fun thing that I loved, doing. And I thought, hey, this is gonna be part of my life. And I think that's where I sort of saw theater originally too. Until I was like, yeah, again around 16, I was like, maybe this is what I want to do for my whole life. Maybe. Um, yeah, and that's what made me. Then I ended up pursuing a pre-college program at Carnegie Mellon, which was close enough to me, and I was like, that was my kind of testing ground of like, could I actually do this? Do I have what it takes? I think I was very curious about that, and then what would it take? What is it? And then sort of discover that, and then ended up getting in, and the rest was sort of history.
Hmm. So when you said you were 16 when you kind of decided that you were going to pursue this, what was the moment that you're like, oh, okay, this is something that I am in love with? Was it like an onstage moment that you said, oh, I am good at this? Or was it just kind of, hey, we're going to shoot for the moon and go for it?
What comes to mind when you say that to me is it was at Carnegie Mellon pre-college, so I'm 16 at the time. It was my summer before my senior year, and I remember my best friend in the world, the person who ended up being the officiant of my wedding. Still, we were in a dorm room at Carnegie Mellon, and we were just like we worked on monologues. I think for like 6 hours in a row. Like it was so like we were like, we're gonna do this, and we'll just like work on this class, and then we ended up working on another monologue, and then we kept going, and I was just like, I realized how much I love the process of it. So for me, that has always been my love. I love being on stage. I get a great adrenaline rush from it. But the thing that I like love is the rehearsal room. Like whether that's rehearsing alone in my room or whether it's, but especially like a collaborative rehearsal room where we're playing and we're going, is it this? Is it this? You know, to me, that's the thing I love the most. So I remember that feeling. And that was when me being like, oh, I think at least for me going, I know I wanted to go to a conservatory to be like, I think I could handle the sort of Hogwarts of it all. Cause I was like, it's 2 a.m. and I don't want to be done. Like I'm tired, but I want to keep going. Like this, let's work on another piece. Let's work on some Shakespeare. Let's work on some, like at that point, I was like getting so into the process of working. And it was just the two of us working for ourselves. This isn't for any grade or for any, we're not showing anyone this work. It was doing the work itself.
So, growing up, were there any certain role models or inspirations that you watched, either like a movie or you had seen perform, and you said, "Oh, I kind of want to emulate them," or like I want to kind of model them? And did you have any of those inspirations growing up?
I don't think so. In terms of like, you mean like celebrities?
Celebrity or just someone in your personal life that you knew?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would look up to. I remember looking up to some of the seniors when I was freshman and being like, oh, could I kind of be like that? Someone who sadly has now passed away, my good friend Chris Bluso, became a great friend later in life. But I remember sort of he was someone that we knew from high school that ended up going to University of Michigan. He ended up being on Broadway. He was 5 years older than me, 4 years older than me, but one just enough older than me that we never didn't share school together. So he was whatever graduated right before my freshman year. So that's someone that I used to like kind of look up to, and we would definitely pay attention to anybody who kind of made it from Pittsburgh. The sort of, oh, Gene Kelly's from Pittsburgh, and these people are from Pittsburgh, and you're like, could people be successful from here? And there are plenty of successful people, but I didn't have a picture of like I want to be exactly like this person. It'd be like I wanted to be successful. I think I always wanted to like work and make theater, but it didn't. I never felt like, oh, I need to emulate this career specifically.
Hmm. Yeah. You always had a clear vision though of what you wanted to do,
For sure.
which
I
is
mean,
nice.
I think shifted a little bit in school. I think I did fall, and I sometimes talk about it on my podcast that like you fall prey to some of the like people feel like the expectations should be one thing graduating from school. So around the kind of showcase time, I definitely felt myself falling into like, oh, I guess I want this. Should I be wanting a pilot? Should I be wanting to be like Zachary Quinto's doing really well? You have these other names then of like CMU alums once I was there, where I was
Hmm.
like, should I be like that? Oh, Josh Gad, he's doing pretty well. Should I try to be like Josh Gad? Like they're definitely you get pushed in that direction. And I don't feel like it's like the school telling you need to be like that. It's just sort of the peer pressure of like, well, I'm at this level. This person's getting these agents. Should I be getting these agents? Should I be going to William Morris? Should I be going to like? Do I want that? And it feels like kind of like the way that all of us are being acted on by the forces of capitalism. That like whether we like it or not, like money is driving us just because that's societally what we do. I feel like that happens in the theater industry sometimes, where you're like, if it's musical theater, it's Broadway. If it's not musical theater, it's like Hollywood. Just will pull you, or TV and film will pull you toward. Well, that's the thing you should want, even though I had a pretty clear idea. I'm like, that's actually not the thing that I was into at 16, 17. When I said I want to do this, it wasn't because I wanted to be in Hollywood movies, but you kind of get pulled toward that because of the money of it all and the fame and all those things that sort
Hmm.
of pull you in that direction.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your college edition specifically, and then we'll talk about MTCA. So
Sure.
you had said that you did like a kind of pre-college program with Carnegie Mellon. What was your college audition experience like? Did you audition for other programs or did you just go for Carnegie Mellon?
I didn't because I got in through that. So they used to do this funny thing at this end of the summer program. You could do an audition, which like was structured like a mock audition. It was structured like a mock audition, but they did let you know, hey, maybe one or two kids will get picked from that thing. And I got in through that. So then didn't need to do the full college tour, which of course is how I ended up getting into coaching, is that I would like help my friends because like I know how to do this. And like all the friends that I knew, of course, they're all like, you have the secret. You got it. I was like, I don't have the secret, but I'm happy to play with you and discover and find what's true. And then in doing that for my friends who were 1 year younger, then 2 year younger, and et cetera, that's sort of how I started. Get into coaching. But my audition itself was like it was like anyone else's audition, like an on-campus audition. It just was at the end of the summer program and I was a little younger. But the same thing with like, you do a couple monologues. I did some very bold monologues. I did a monologue where I stripped half naked, and it was, and I felt, oh, this, I'm being really artistic and really brave because I'm going for it. And then it is a really wacky Shakespeare monologue that I was really into, and it sort of felt like where I was at the time of like, big, bold physical comedy definitely felt within my range. I did feel really good with language. That felt like something I was always strong with. So I was going to, try to lead with that with the Shakespeare. I always felt like really good at like sort of subtle, vulnerable work. So I had some of that in my, but like I felt like I kind of knew where my skills were then, and I was able to show them off pretty well. And then yeah, and then I got in, and I was like, great, this is amazing. So that was my cool college experience. I do have a memory of, and I now often will tell this to students of like, we'll talk about the kind of psychological prep that you need to do this audition process of like, how do you get yourself in the right mind state? Like it was a practice audition, and I did feel, I wasn't like, I didn't psych myself up like this was going to be the audition, but I had this little weird feeling right before I walked in the room of like, I'm going to get in. I'm gonna get into this school from this audition. Like it just was that, I was like, it's gonna be me. And it's a confidence that I wish I could have held every audition in my career. I'm like, where did that go? Where did that little sprite on my shoulder who told me, Charlie, you're gonna get in? Like, why don't I have that for book this show or book it? It would happen a couple times in my life where I'd have that kind of confidence of, but I just was like, I felt so prepared. I'd spent those many, many hours prepping in for the whole summer camp. And I just was like, I'm in a great place. I feel really good. And so then there's something cool about like, walk in the room and just make that true for yourself. I was like, okay, so just do the thing, do what you've been doing, because there's no pressure. You already know you're going to get in. It's sort of
Mhm.
as I'm talking about, it's like the flip side. Some people go have great auditions and they're like, well, I have no chance here. Let's just screw it. Let's just have a great audition because I have no chance. I almost had the opposite of like, I'm already getting in, so there's no pressure. You know you're going to get in or whatever. I don't know, but I wish I could hold on to that, whatever that muse who touched my shoulder that day for other
Mhm.
auditions. But I have a very distinct memory of where I was sitting when I was like, I think this is happening.
So post college, what was your transition to New York like? Was that something, I mean, you had been in Pittsburgh, so you kind of knew somewhat of like a big city life. Was it a big change going to New York after college?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I think this is like old advice passed on, but people say like it takes a year to learn New York. I think that is so true. Like at least a year to feel like you have a sense of what it is. I had a kind of weird experience. But I did a showcase in New York and LA, and had fine results from both of those. Like I had actually had these really great results in LA, and so there was a version of me sort of pulling toward. That's what I mean. Like, would I actually go out there? Because it felt like, I think skill set wise, that was something that I could have done and did consider. But I also had this job offer from the Shakespeare Theater of DC, which happened right after school. So it was like 2 months after school that I would be potentially spending a year there. It's basically apprenticing. So I was being like in 4 different shows, a lot of understudying, a lot of like, but it's like almost sort of becomes like a grad school year is how they pitch it. But you get to like do this, you get to be on these shows, you get to understudy all these great parts, you get to work at this
Hmm.
cool theater. I was really into Shakespeare at that point. I sort of had dove into it, so I thought it'd be a cool intro to that world. So I had spent that year right out of school in DC, which gave me a little bit of like living on your own DC world, though it's not New York. New York is its own world. And then I think I felt some of the pressure of like, this is post showcase thing that happens where it's like you're hot for a little bit of time, so you got to use it. And I felt like, did I lose that year? Like when I got to New York, then I was like, I got to meet everyone, I got to do everything. Like I was like really pushing my agent to be like, can I get out here? Can you send me here? Like how? Like I was like, I felt like all my classmates had already met all the casting directors that I hadn't really met. I met with them maybe right after showcase, but then spent a year away. So I felt like I was kind of playing catch up for that first year in New York, not only learning New York myself, but then trying to like reintroduce yourself to casting people into agents and all those kind of things.
So what was your auditioning experience like in New York? Because you had said you worked like in DC. When were you trying to book everything, or were you kind of taking time and getting used to the city and enjoying it? What was that like for you?
Definitely not enjoying it. I mean, I just have just the memory of like stress all the time. I was auditioning a lot, which was great. I was being sent out. Um, I have the memory of like, I'm 6'4", if you can't tell that on the podcast. So it's like I'm a large person. And at 22, I guess 23, but I do kind of have a baby face. I mean, I still have a baby face. Hopefully, you see on the podcast video. But I kind of had that baby face too. So I felt like casting was kind of trying to figure out what to do with me, like what kind of stuff I could go out for. And so I always had this interesting experience of like I was going out for a lot of roles where it would say like 35 to 40, and I'd be like, well, I'm 23, and so then there was that kind of choice of like, should I try to play older? Should I try to like, am I trying to book this job or am I trying to meet this person? Because what happens to you early on is like, they were just trying to meet me. It's like not, they're casting the show. They're not like throwing it away, but like, if your agent says, hey, I have this guy, he's really talented, but can you meet him? Often people go, yeah, I'll meet you. Right. But then you have that weird experience of like, I want to introduce you to me. And I'm so used to the college world. I'm already at this point coaching the college world. So I'm trying to be like, this is Charlie and Charlie the musical, like what we tell our kids to do. Like, this is me. But then often I'm like, but if I really show you me, am I going to book this part, like this professor, or some of these things that I'm going out for, where it's like it's a little bit older, or just seems like it's not exactly me. And this, so that was my experience with a lot of theater stuff, and then with TV and film. And though I now feel like I have a better understanding of it, I also was like, I struggled with some of the early stuff that you go out for, which tends to be for most people, you'll often have like an under five kind of co-star role. So and they call it co-star, but even co-star sounds like it's like you're the second lead. It's like no, co-star in TV is like you have a very, very small part. And so I was going for a lot of those co-star parts, often which would want you to be what I looked like. And I think I would sometimes resist doing that. Like if it was like, he wanted you to, maybe I was playing a racist, I was playing a cop, I was playing something that was like gruff in a way that I'm like gruff and arrogant. And some of these things I'm like, I'm not against playing them necessarily, but I also like wanted people to like me. And so I think so often I would look back at those auditions and I'd be like, you tried to like make him charming. It was like, this part is not charming. Why are you trying to make this charming cop? He's like, that's not what this is going out for. But I'd be like, but I want you to think Charlie's really smart and funny and cool. And it's like, that's not what this
You
audition was.
try and make him redeemable.
Make him redeemable. Which, to some extent, I think there's an argument in the theater world that's not horrible to bring a lot of what you can do and show your skill set. A lot in the TV and film world is like, can I use you or not? Like, are you right for this or not? Especially when it's a co-star, you're almost showing your intelligence by like nailing the part, as opposed to being like, but what it could be is when it's like when it's 5 lines, they're like, we're not really looking for what it could be. We're looking for what this is. Then later, once you're auditioning for pilots, of course, they're like, oh, look at this creativity and he can improv and all these other. I wanted to show off my 4 years of training in those 5 lines, and sometimes I go, that was a little much, Charlie. It was a little much.
Have you done a lot of TV and film work?
No, I mean that is a medium. I really enjoy watching TV. It's not the thing that I would love performing. I mean, it's just that experience of like, it's a really specific and beautiful skill set. It is not the thing that lights me up the way that I was lit up in that dorm room, or that I'm lit up on stage, in terms of like bringing the full athleticism of yourself, bringing, I think your physicality, your creativity. Like there are people who find that within the TV and film world. And I'm sure that, if my career gone a different way, maybe I could have found some of that in TV and film, but I found both TV and film and commercial auditions just always frustrating, endlessly frustrating in terms of the experience of sort of trying to commercialize the things that I loved were not as exciting to me. I liked the improv. I liked I ended up doing a lot of improv later, maybe 5-6 years into the city. I like did the UCB and all that kind of stuff where I'm like, I loved that. I loved Shakespeare. I loved moments where I got to feel like I was being creative. And I didn't find that TV felt like a particularly creative medium to me.
Mm-hmm. So in the city when you were auditioning, I hear a lot of people talk about like their survival jobs and what they do when they're not booking, because it's not always the glitz and glamour of, booking after booking after booking,
Yeah.
even though we'd love it to be. So what would you kind of do to get through those hard times when you weren't booking in a dry spell or whatever the case may be?
I mean, I think blessing and the curse of it all, as I turn to reveal my beautiful logo, was I did this MTC. I did musical theater college auditions. I was at the time mostly just teaching for us, though by pretty soon after school, I was already sort of an assistant director for the company. So doing some admin stuff, administrative stuff. But it's been a constant in my life since I was 18. It wasn't called MTCA when I was 18. It was sort of a bunch of friends putting stuff together and helping friends out, and then sort of ended up really forming into the company that it did. But this is the thing that I would do. The cool thing about it for me is that I could do it when I wasn't working, and I could also do it when I was working, fit in and around as best as I could. And so then that sort of formed a supplemental income where I had more work than I wanted when I was in the middle of a show because I was teaching and acting, and then probably not quite enough work to sustain me if I never got an acting job. When on a show, it couldn't ramp up all the way to be like 40 hours a week. But I was able to do that. I had waited tables in high school, and I just like know my personality. Like I feel like I have a lot of energy and a lot of like give. And you'll sometimes see this in waiters where you're like, man, you're putting on a show for me. That was definitely me. And it was like I would come home so exhausted from those evenings. I'm sure again I could have been an adult and learned to give a little less, but to me I was like, I do not want to wait tables. There's no chance I'll be able to act if I'm like spending 6 hours a day or 7 hours
Hmm.
a day acting to for my customers and putting all that forward. I'm like, I get exhausted by it. So I was like, I don't want to do that. I really feel filled up by teaching. And it's really cool. It helped inspire me to keep my own career going, and then also then blessedly turned into this. Really, now this is my source of income is from running this company and from still teaching for it, but really the running of it all. Sort of turned into this slow motion. Oh, cool! What a cool little path that I would not have expected at 18. It was going to turn into this, but it just kept being a bigger and bigger part of my life.
Hmm. Yeah, and I want to hear more about MTCA because I know, when I worked with you at the Performing Arts Project, a lot of us were on the cusp of either in the college audition process, getting ready for it, or somewhere in the middle. And you had so much experience in here's what we look for in a room, and here's how
Oh,
to market
experience.
yourself, and kind of marketing yourself in that maybe 3 to 5 minutes or that
Yeah.
32 bar cut. You had said that you were like 18 and helping friends, and now you're the director of it, which, congratulations to you.
Well,
So
thank you, buddy.
what's been your journey? I just want to hear more about what you do there because it's so interesting.
I mean, I think it's a we stayed sort of curious to what the process was. I think we always were fascinated by the process. I think we loved the process, those of us who were doing it from the beginning, and tried to kind of stay curious and grow with what it was. It was so different. It's not 20 years ago that we're talking about. Me starting to do this, and it was so different back then. I mean, there were the audition, the sort of the 5 minutes in the room that you're prepping, not that different. I mean, it's changed a little bit, but for the most part, that has been what it has been. Everything else about the process has evolved and changed, and sort of we've had to evolve and change and grow with it. So you've sort of seen it transform from what was always a competitive process, but has become sort of a beast with it. But talking about teachers and people who love, and I don't know if I'm jumping on questions later, but one of my wonderful teachers that I had when I was in ninth grade, eighth grade, Ellen Letrick, she was the sort of founder of this company. And that's who sort of inspired me to do this. She had loved this process. I think, we came from a very similar philosophy of like being student centered. We're sort of very heart centered. Even though some of this you could call it marketing, like we wouldn't think of it like marketing in terms of yourself. We're like, I think we do really believe in this process in some of the same ways that any of the colleges do, as like a pretty artistic, personal, individual journey kind of thing. Because like to some extent the colleges have to worry about some of the marketing and the branding your senior year as you get to showcase yourself. But the cool thing about the way in is like you don't have to be a finished product. So it's really fun to like help somebody with their journey when the journey doesn't have to be ending in a finished product. Even though again, you're doing 2 songs, 2 monologues, you're going to put some product down on a pre-screen once pre-screen started existing. But even then, I think our philosophy and I think what we do is like it is all about the journey. It is all about the growth. It's all about your skill set and sort of discovering more of your own individuality. And like, I would have loved, I basically built the company that I'm like, I would have loved to have, like, because I was really interested in like, how do I work on my artistry from that kid who was like, do I have enough of that in growing up in suburban Pittsburgh? Do I have enough cool, like to be like, how does one discover what makes them unique as an artist? How does one discover who you are? I think that's like a really fun project for any 17, 18-year-old to go on that journey. And that's some of what college is already. But like the acting world makes you do that really explicitly. So you have to say, here's who I am. But the cool thing you can do is here's who I am right now, right at this moment, and here's what I'm curious about. So it's like, how do you output something that says this is who I am, but doesn't like shellac it and say I'm X and Y and that's it. Like you're not ending the script. It's you're writing it still in draft form and continue to write in draft form. So I think that was really exciting to me to kind of that didn't seem to be out there in the world in terms of the kind of advice that people were giving about colleges. Back then, it was all about like, these are the dresses to wear and these are the songs to sing. Do not sing these, do sing these. And we were like, we're not interested in that. We're like interested in being like, who are you as an artist? How do we help you showcase, but still showcase the range that you want to showcase and showcase all the skills you have. And so then there was a lot of learning for us about like, we knew what our training was artistically and what we knew we could do, but then we had to really learn the process. And, I've had to really learn the academic end of the process. It's where, and now with the podcast, I really literally talk to all the schools about the specifics of their curriculum and all that kind of stuff. And so really to learn the academic side of things. And we've become a sort of soup to nuts company that like helps you We'll give you college advising. We'll give you essay help. We'll give you SATs if you want them. We'll do wellness coaching with you. Of course, we do monologue, songs, dance, vocal performance, all that kind of stuff. Vocal tech, I should say. But so it's grown into like as the process evolved, how do we help keep serving students? But it sort of started from this like that core of who is this human being and how do you show yourself in the room as best as possible. At least that was the company I was interested in growing. And certainly Ellen wanted that too. And then now it's now 7 or 8 years ago that Ellen left the company. She just wanted to move on to something else. And so then me and my partner Leo took over as directors of the company and kind of try to carry that vision forward.
Hmm. Yeah, so you had said that you kind of talk with the colleges and stuff to kind of see what they're looking for. How else do you kind of keep up with, the theater world is ever changing. They're always looking
Mm.
for new things and new productions and new styles. How do you kind of keep up with that since it is always a constant flow?
I mean, it's a constant flow. And I think what surprised me 10 years into the process is how much it's almost a symbiotic flow. I'm not sure that's quite the right word, but it's a two-way flow, is what I really mean. In that, like, I think I knew, oh, colleges are going to start reacting to the industry. So we have to really pay attention to what the industry is doing. What I then noticed after spending a lot of years in the college world, I'm like, the industry really reacts to what the colleges are doing too. Like the students would graduate and then kind of demand an industry that didn't already exist. And then it sort of became true that like you talk to a 24-year-old today and they're like they expect the industry to be what college told them it would be, and then that kind of becomes true because their expectations have to be met to some extent. And then there's a little bit of a melding of the old and the new, and there's some friction there and some tension there. But I think the short answer is you really do try to pay attention to both ends and try to pay attention to that interflow. We have relationships with so many of these department heads, though those are also ever changing in the symbiotic flow of people of moving and around. And but you see what's going on in the professional world. I still see a ton of theater. Something like pop and how much pop has invaded musical theater, which is not new. That's like 20 years old now in terms of that. The ways that does intersect in the college world, and it certainly has influence. There's much more, definitely, than there was when we started. But also, then sometimes colleges push back and they go, "Okay, but we want a little bit of this. We don't want everything." I mean, if you asked a professional musical theater major how much pop do you sing, they're going to say a lot of them will say it's 90% of what I sing, and every once in a while I'll go in for a golden age musical. But if you're not particularly going for that, you're just saying almost nothing but pop, whether it's pop MT or pop is going to be in the professional world. The college world isn't that way. The college world has seen that and said, some of them go, sure, if you'd like to do a pop song, you could, but they do want to see more traditional musical theater. And they're going, hey, we are more foundational, in terms of what we're doing. So again, you sort of, it shifts and changes every year, truly every year. And there'll be some years where there's a bigger change. When we introduce pre-screens, when then we introduce the common pre-screen, there's all these little things that come in and you go, okay, that does shift the landscape a little bit, but then it reverberates back. And then people go, and then one program introduced something and everyone else goes, oh, that's cool. What's a wild card? Now all of a sudden everyone's doing wild cards because someone introduced it. It's like these cool ways in which it'll shift off each other. And then somebody else innovates and then it comes back to the other schools. That's certainly true between the industry and the colleges. What's also interesting from the college perspective, we often say like there's no czar of the college process. There's no one going, aha, this is how it should be. So sometimes it'll seem like the colleges are trying to drive the students crazy when actually they just don't listen to and interact with each other. Actually, the industry interacts more with colleges than they do with each other because they don't all come together at a meeting and go, this is what college admissions should look like. If anything, they're
Hmm.
kind of competing with each other. Whereas with the industry, they're graduating their students into it and going, oh, what's working? What's not working? They have more of a symbiotic relationship with the industry. But with each other, they're often trying to find out their own places and almost intentionally making the process harder on the students because they feel like they need to for their own competitive edge. So that's why
Hmm.
it's like people will be like, why is it so hard? I'm like, it's hard because the schools have their incentives, you have their incentives, and they don't always line up easily.
So how do you kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what the industry wants, in the real world in New York or Chicago? How do you kind of keep on that?
I mean, certainly helps seeing a lot of stuff. My wife is a very active actress. Well, she's a Tony nominee, Elizabeth Stanley, for those who don't know my bio perfectly. So I get to see a lot of that in terms of, with the experience of, stuff like when I was actively auditioning, which it's now 5 years ago since I've actively auditioned as an actor. self-tapes that existed already, but they weren't what they were today. And so I'm like getting to see some of that through her experience is certainly helpful. But then also, half of my podcast, I talk to artists too. So with half of the episodes of my podcast, I talk to schools about their programs, what they're looking for, sort of talk to the faculty is half of it. And the other half, I talk to artists. I just had a TPAPper, Isaac Powell, is released today on the podcast. But we had Gavin Creel, and we have a lot of awesome artists in just terms of what they've done in their careers, how they're staying relevant. Some of the ones who are more established, they aren't necessarily giving you the most up-to-date point of view. And so then we'll have like younger alumni on. We'll have 23, 24-year-old people on to be like, what's the industry like for you? And to get a sense of that. That's certainly helpful. It's for the listeners, but helpful for me too, to kind of continually check in. And we do with our alumni too. We say, hey, what is that experience in terms of, are you seeing things? Are you graduating? Your showcase experience at 22 is very different than mine was 17 years ago or whatever it was, in terms of the different experience of it. It's like, it's not completely different, but it's different. You're graduating into a different world than what I graduated into. So you have to constantly pay attention. And, with each year we try to go, is this still true? Is this updated? Is this helping us? And yeah, I guess ear to the ground is the sort of short answer, is we try to keep the ear to the
Mhm.
ground.
Yeah. You said it was 5 years since you were actively auditioning. Do you miss that, or does kind of do an MTCA kind of fill that, creative itch that you might have?
It's a great question. I definitely miss it. I mean, and it doesn't feel, to me, it doesn't feel like, hey, this, I didn't say I'm hanging up my shoes. It sort of was a decision of like, okay, given where the company is, and honestly, given where I had a child, so at the time we're getting pregnant, I'm like, okay, so given what I might need to support my daughter, and then also really to support my wife's career, which, the best version of the career that I want would never be as financially remunerative as Elizabeth Sports' career at this point. At like her B- year, I'd be like, well, that's a lot more than my A+ year at this regional theater and at this regional theater. So it just made sense for us to be like, we didn't think it was realistic or probably feasible for me to run this company and act while she's also acting while we have a child who's not in school. Potentially once she's in school, it could be a little bit easier, but the regional theater world is tricky with travel in terms of what that means. I mean, does that mean I don't see her for 3 months if I go do a regional show? Does that mean like that kind of stuff it's tough on kids? As they get older, it could be a little more possible, but Elizabeth's making those decisions all the time with like, can I even just for a Broadway tryout, if I'm going to be gone for 6 weeks, what will that look like? But like in this version, I can potentially travel with them. Whereas if I'm like, I'm still auditioning myself, it just becomes a little trickier. So I do think the question of do I find it creatively fulfilling? I think I have to. And I think it's something I recognized in myself, the 16-year-old version of myself who loved rehearsals and loved that artistic process, that I knew I wanted something really creative in my life. And it's part of the genesis of the podcast is what, like, to me, the podcast is a creative project that fulfills me. And I sort of continue to try to seek out creativity in my MTCA work. And then I'm not sure exactly what that would mean in the future. I think likely potentially more producing, more directing some of the stuff. I started a theater company. Now this is 12 years ago, which was really exciting for me to get to do some of that behind the stage stuff. That anything that's in the creative world scratches the creative itch. It's not the same as acting, of course. There's a very specific itch that is walking into a rehearsal room and creating a character and doing all the stuff that you train to do. But it's like you have to find that balance of, can you scratch enough of your itch and then also live a sustainable life and all those things. But so the short answer, I think, yes, I find a lot of creativity in teaching, a lot of creativity in the podcast, and then crunching numbers and some of the administrative stuff is less so. So I have to find that balance there.
Have you ever been on like the other side of the table in the rehearsal room, been a writer, a director? Do you do any of that kind of work as well?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I'm not actively doing it other than, of course, like I hire coaches. So like behind the table in terms of like when we we're right now hiring a bunch of our sort of next class of MTCA coaches. But yes, so what I ran a company called Esperance Theater Company with two friends of mine, where we did that, sort of behind the table, directed, produced, the producing element. My God, it's so helpful. From like every actor should have to produce at least one show. You probably will hate it, but you'll just get the experience of, oh my God, like the things that I thought were what happening from an actor's perspective are just like not what's on the minds of the people who are behind the table. With the director, it's not so far indifferent because they're adding in visual elements and tying it all together, but they're still in the show. With some of the producing stuff, there's just a lot of nonsense. And then like
Hmm.
some of the stuff that actors will be like, oh, this was because of this. It's like, nope, it wasn't at all. It was because of the venue. It was because of this. It was because monetarily it didn't make sense to do rehearsals this time, or things where you go like, oh, these people are really screwing you over, and you're like, oh, now when you're responsible for those decisions, it's helpful to be like, oh, I see
Hmm.
where I fit in as an actor when I show up to rehearse, and all the other work that's happened to that get me to that point of it's tech time, and you're like, you are such a small part of this tech process when you sort of see all the things that go into it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Do you do any of those? Do you do master classes or do you mostly
Totally.
just do your stuff at MTCA?
Totally, yeah. And I've taught. I mean, I taught at Texas State. I subbed for Neil for a while. Teach at Pace. I've taught at a couple different places. I mean, at this point, at the moment, given the structure of MTCA, it is a pretty full time job. So I'm not like certainly doing master classes. I do summer events. I'll do a lot of college prep stuff at different places, which sort of MTCA work and sort of not. But to go teach for a semester or something would be tricky. As fun as it might be,
Hmm.
I'm like, it's just tough given the sort of what the lift I'm doing currently administratively for MTCA.
Yeah. So with you being so involved in kind of seeing where the theater industry is going, whether with putting kids into it or kind of hearing the feedback from the industry, where do you see the industry going in the next, we'll say 5 years?
Ooh. It's so funny. I ask plenty of people this question. I even stopped asking it because like I have no answer to this question. I'm like, what would I answer? I really don't know. 5 years. I mean, I'll say I think the trend of theater is beautifully up. It was certainly I think that was already happening pre-pandemic. That I think it was increasing, and then the pandemic was its own craziness. But certainly post-pandemic, the trend of having live human experiences being important is up, up, up. Um, you see it in like Broadway's back, New York City's back. It's thriving, in a way that probably was true about a year ago. That really felt back. I mean, obviously we literally returned years before, but it sort of felt like we're still in the sludge. And it takes a while also for productions to come. So some productions that sort of had been slated before and that were still in waiting weren't jumping in immediately, but then they all sort of were like, let's rush in, let's do it, we're ready. So basically to say that I think the theater industry is pretty strong right now. The reason I sort of balk at the question is just like I don't think any of us know what like AI is going to do
Hmm.
to us. I don't think it's going to eliminate theater, but what it's going to do to the TV and film industry. And the TV and film industry, as much as I might want to say like, oh well, it's not for me. It's such a driver of the entertainment industry, including in New York, including in like people that can make a sustainable living. It's like you can make a sustainable living basically in two ways as an actor if you want to like be an adult and have a family, which is like to be on Broadway for a long period of time or to be in TV and film in some way. It's not true. Of course, there are other things, commercials, but I'm saying in terms of main things, it's like realistically, there are people who live the life of a regional theater actor. It's pretty tough unless you're going to live a pretty nomadic life just to be able to literally line up enough work to make a sustainable life. You can do it, but to be like, I'm going to save for retirement or whatever is hard to do. If you worked constantly at Shakespeare Theater DC and then the Guthrie and then the Old Globe, I mean, there are places that pay enough that you could do it, but it's a tricky industry. So basically, we're saying that if TV and film is really hit by sort of AI and who knows where it's going, and LA, if LA disappears, like people think it's going to disappear, and in terms of where TV and film, it all goes overseas. Who knows? Those kind of things. I think it could really change the way we think about the theater industry, and I don't know. I don't know how. Um, I don't know. My prognostications probably aren't that good there, but I think some of the obvious things if people could see that if they're not in New York is that you'll continue to see a lot of small productions. I think is really hot right now. Small in a lot of ways, which I would imagine will continue for the next 5 years. Small meaning often small cast. They're also doing this kind of cool thing. I don't know if it's cool, but it makes sense economically. They're doing this like small theater thing. So it's like these exclusive experiences where sometimes these tickets are $500 because there's 80 total tickets in this tiny theater and you can reach out and touch the one actor who's on stage or the three actors are on stage, however you're going to do it. I think that certainly from a financial model makes sense for theaters or for both for theaters in terms of New York, but then also those are things you can then transfer to across the country and make sense. So I imagine we're talking about intimacy. I think theatricality, all those things that are, that are unique to theater will probably continue in the next 5 years. If you ask me to go beyond 5 years, I throw up my hands.
It's very difficult to kind of guess. There's a lot of more so than ever, I feel a lot of outside variables like AI and, who'd have thought there would be a pandemic. And so I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of outside variables that just when you think you got it figured out, something's coming along to change the game.
And stuff like politics too. I mean, like we really don't know. And, I always try to stay pretty apolitical on my podcast, but like you really don't know the ways in which I don't mean necessarily even partisan politics, but just like world events will affect
Hmm.
art, in terms of like if there's a crazy depression, I'm like, that will affect the way we make art. It just will. Like if there's war, that affects art. Like, so it's like world events end up really shaping what theater chooses to do and how we choose to make art. I mean, all these theaters are losing their NEA funding right now. Sort of um, it's one of the things that's happening in the sort of theater world. And I think like that we don't know what the effect that will have on it. Like that the NEA had a really interesting and specific effect in the history of theater, but you don't always know the sort of knock-on effects of like if something goes out, like what replaces it? What does that how does that affect the way that theater is funds itself? How does it affect the way that theater is made, choices people make? We don't know. But I think it will that will definitely have an effect on regional theater, certainly. But I
Hmm.
guess we'll see what it is.
So before we kind of wrap up the conversation, there are just a few more things that I'd like to ask. So if you were to be giving your Tony speech right now, there's no
I don't get
music
to
to cut
write
you
it.
off.
I don't get to we have bullet points for this question. All right, keep going. Yeah. Okay.
No,
Uh-uh.
this is your practice round.
Okay.
This is just like, the rough draft.
Okay.
There's no music to cut you off, nothing like that. Who would be the people that you mentioned in your speech kind of behind the scenes that
Hmm.
might get cut off when the music starts playing?
You mean I've already done the agents, the
Yeah,
managers,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
casting director, I've
We've
done
done
that.
the business savvy stuff and think who we need to,
I,
but who are
I,
the family
I
people?
will tell you I will do this, but I just want to tell you the story of the just as soon as you said that it made me like tear up thinking about the Tony night. So the Tony night, it was the pandemic Tony night, the
Hmm.
return from the pandemic Tony night, which Elizabeth and I had chosen to have a child during the pandemic. And so Elizabeth was attending as a nominee and 5 weeks after having given birth. So it was kind of a crazy night. Like literally, my parents were like in a hotel across from the theater the Tonys were at, like with like breast milk that had just been pumped and whatever, taking care of a baby. But they did Elizabeth and we were with her castmate Sean, who was also a nominee, and they like gave their Tony speeches at like 2 a.m. Like we were like the first night out, we were so tired, we were so whatever, and they did this exercise and it was very beautiful, meaningful. I'm sure mine wouldn't be the same. I mean, I imagine I'd have to thank my wife first. uh I think I hope I would thank my parents for I'm going to say for believing in me, but it's not quite probably the right word. I feel like I would want to thank my parents because they loved and supported me, even though they didn't understand this. And something I talk about with my MTCA is a lot of like, a lot of parents feel like they can't support their kids unless they are themselves knowledgeable artists and ready to be like tell them what the industry is. And I'm like, you really can. Like, and it took my parents a while. They fought it a lot. They hated the idea of me going into it, but like I felt like it was a moment where they listened to me when I was like, this is what I love. This is what I want to do. I need to get you on board with it. It was still hard. It took like a year probably to get them on board. But then by the time I was going to school, like they were on board and they were fans. And so then they ended up being, all the worst examples of theater parents in terms of like every audition, did HBO call? I'm like, yeah, mom, I booked the HBO. I just didn't tell you. That's why I would have like it'd be that version of like, it's been a week. Have they called? I'm like, yep, nope, sorry, forgot again. They booked it. I booked it. That kind of stuff. And once they were supporters in kind of fun and awkward ways. But yeah, but I would hope I would thank them. I would thank Ellen. This is my early theater teacher. I hope I would, but both in terms of her sort of belief in me at 14, 15, but also then her belief in me in terms of helping run this company that she sort of gave me this beautiful company, which is such a part of my heart and let me pour so much of my heart into it, which is kind of its own sign of trust to like let somebody love what is your child and let it be their child too. So hopefully I thank Ellen. Oh God, who would I forget? I don't know. Are there embarrassing people I should have said? Maybe some of my professors at school. I mean, I had Don Wadsworth on the podcast, who was my favorite professor at school, and he's basically who accepted me into the school and always really believed in me and pushed me hard to be the person that he thought I could be. And I sort of, you always really appreciate. It's not just the people who think you're great; it's the people who like, I think you can be better. I know the vision of what you could be, and I want to make you that person. And Don was that for me. So I loved both that he thought I was good, but also that he thought I could be great. And that was exciting to me because I was like, I think I could be great too, and I want to work to be that. So I really love that. Is that enough of
Yeah.
a Tony speech? No
Oh
music?
no, that
Oh
was
God.
perfect. No, there's no music.
This is
That's
not
what's
something
great
I've
about
written.
it.
I've not fantasized about this specific experience. Yeah.
Um, so if there were to be one person from the theatrical world, whether on stage, off stage, wherever, that I could get on the podcast to hear their story and interview them like this, whose story would you think would be
Mm.
interesting to hear?
I feel this feels like a question I'm too qualified for because I literally do spend all my time being like,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
artist should I book? Which whatever, So I certainly think, some of my podcast guests have loved getting to know their stories. Someone like Celia Keenan Bolger, I think was just like awesome. I think that's somebody who, I'm right now booking to have her on for a second time on the pod. She's someone who I think has had a really interesting life. And, in sort of some of the ways that I sort of was talking about, how do you pursue this college process as a process artistically, staying curious, thinking about the moment of getting into school, but also the moments after school and also the human being you're going to become. Like, she's someone who I think really lives her life that way beautifully. And if you listen to her talk, you're like, yeah, that's cool. Like, during the pandemic, she became a death doula, which means like she helped people die, which is like this whole like, and at the time my stepdad was dying and I was like, oh my God, that is such a thing to be for an artist. So it's like being a birth doula. It's like doula, someone who helps people be
Hmm.
born, for those who don't know that. Anyway, so Celia Keenan Bolger I think would be a great one. I think lots of, my bestie Alejandro we should have on. He's also lives a fascinating life. He's just starting this cool kind of communication company. Not starting, it has started and is now growing this other company, but also is an amazing artist, art maker, all these things. So many people come to mind. Of my 90 episodes, they'd be like, half of them would be great to have on the pod. Yeah.
So one of the last things I have, we talked a lot about this industry. It's not always the glitz and glamour. Sometimes you're not working, you're not booking. So what's one thing that you would tell listeners to kind of help them stay motivated and focused on their dreams, even when the road gets tough?
Even when the road get tough. I think a big part of it is it's really hard, especially when you're young, but to try not to wrap up too much of your identity in your success in this industry. It's like it's never not going to matter. It has to matter, but we want it to only matter as much as it actually matters. So it's like, yes, there's money behind this, and there's also exciting career success, which could lead to other cool career success. That all can be legitimate without it becoming like this is who I am. Like, and I think this industry, especially because we put so much of our heart into it, it can feel like we put our soul and our identity into our latest job or our level of success. And I think, this is a version of, you've probably heard the advice of like, don't get too high, don't get too low. It's like, you, even in the good moments, if you let yourself tie your identity to, I'm working at Shakespeare in the Park. I am the greatest thing since sliced bread. People walk out and I want to be me. Like, if you have that experience, then naturally when you're like, I haven't worked in 6 months, you're like, I suck, I'm the worst, whatever. And if as much as possible you can go, it's not who I am, it's just where my career is right now. And it's also like where I'm at this moment. If you take that little bit of step back and go, I'm all these things. I'm the person who was up there and I'm the person who was down there. I'm the person who's achieved this success and this person who's failed at this and struggled in this way. Like, all of that is true for me. And I think one of those sort of tangible ways that I try to make that true for myself is like embrace the things that I love outside of theater. It's not just like so that you have fun to do other things, but those can be anchoring identity. So, sometimes people be like, go get a hobby. It's like, to me, it's not like just go knit because knitting is fun or distract you. It's like, when I'm a very competitive softball player, I'm like, when I'm playing softball, I'm like, that's also my identity. Like, I'm that person, and the wins and losses are exciting for me, but they also aren't the whole of who I am, because then there's also my artistic career. And then, now it's certainly the easy thing. Any parent out there is going to know, like, when you have a kid, it's like, that's like a huge percentage of your identity then becomes going the ups and downs of how's she doing and what's her life experience. And so, like,
Hmm.
just being able to tie yourself down to a couple different anchoring sources of identity, because you're never going to say that your career isn't some part of it. But I just watch a lot of young actors watch that become such a part of their identity, and then it becomes when the heartbreak happens, it's like, if you're like, my entire identity is in this relationship, when you get a breakup, then you're like, I'm nothing. So, well, no, you're not. Never nothing. That might have been part of who you are, but you're also a daughter, and you're also an aunt, and you're also
Hmm.
whatever all the things that you are that aren't just a girlfriend or whatever, in terms of how you put yourself. So yeah, that'd be my big advice. Try not to tie too much of your identity to your career. It's going to happen, but how do you kind of leave little horcruxes of yourself in different places that you go. It's not my whole soul in this thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Did I
that's
just give
awesome.
advice to basically be Voldemort? That's not what I wanted to do. I hated that. I mean, I like the image made sense to me, but I was like, I'm not, don't like murder people and put parts of your soul in other people. That's not what I'm saying. But yeah, break up your soul a little bit, you know.
I thank you for clarifying because I was gonna go out with my wizard wand and just cause mayhem. So I'm really glad that you put that disclaimer
Go
because
audition for Cursed Child. Come on, you
yeah,
better
who
book.
knows what would have happened if you hadn't.
Yeah, exactly.
So the last thing that I have for us is our rapid fire segment.
Oh God.
Um,
Okay.
so they're not theater specific questions. They are just questions that I think are sometimes fun to get to know people with.
Great.
So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, sounds good. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. What's one of your guilty pleasures?
Uh, NBA basketball way past my bedtime.
Okay. If you were a flavor of ice cream, what would you be?
Survivor would have been a better answer. Survivor. I'm obsessed with Survivor. In the pandemic, became obsessed with Survivor. Okay, what flavor of ice cream? Chocolate chip cookie dough. My favorite flavor.
Okay.
Lots of little treats inside.
Uh, Zombies or aliens?
Aliens, I guess. Probably neither, but aliens.
Yeah, neither would be my answer.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, Barack Obama.
That's a good one. A superpower that you wish you had.
Superpower that I wish I had. Uh, superpowers are imaginary, says Solvay. I think I would love to. All of them. I don't know. I mean, I'm like any of them sound. I don't know that I want to fly or be invisible or I don't know that any of those are particularly interesting. I don't know. I mean, I guess health. Like some people, if I
Mm,
could I live? Regrow my body or whatever. Wolverine powers. I guess those would be cool.
yeah,
You know,
that's a
I
good
don't know if I
one.
want to live literally forever, but live a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Would you rather be able to time travel or teleport?
Teleport. I think time travel would freak me out. I mean, the idea of
Yeah,
it's cool, but I would be in the loop of like, well, wait, didn't I already do this? And has this already happened? What happens to my no? That would freak me out. Teleport would be fun.
yeah. Okay, that was the
Yeah.
last one. You did
Oh my
great.
God, we did great. That was pretty rapid, though. I
Yeah.
wasn't confident with my answers, CJ. I have a couple of notes. I could have been more confident with those answers. It's always hard. I remember this from TPAP too, because they would like make us do these intro things. I have such the part of me that said, "Hey, I'm really good at that suburban monologue in terms of like vulnerability and like bringing that and like bringing it in a way that's like comfortable for me, but almost uncomfortable with the level of vulnerability I'm willing to bring to as an actor, which I think is a good skill. I'm always tempted to bring that to like these kinds of questions or question and answer things. But then the other part of me is like, you're an actor, be funny. And so then those things are the truth and vulnerability is at war with the be funny. And I don't always like what comes out, you know.
Well, I thought it was great. I
Oh,
thought it was
thanks. I
great.
appreciate it.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for being on today. I'm so glad that
Likewise.
we got to chat. Is there any projects that you're working on that you would like to plug or promote?
I'll plug it just a little bit to MTCA if that anyone does is interested in sort of checking out what we do. You can go to mtca.com. That's mtca.com. It's musical theater college editions, but we call it mtca.com. And check out, what we do in terms of individual college prep. You also are welcome if you want to check out my podcast. We air every week on Wednesdays. We have these guest conversations with artists about their careers and sort of how their education's affected their careers. And then we have guests that are faculty talking about their specific colleges and kind of the college landscape, at least as they know it as a whole. And then you'll get takeaways and stuff from me throughout. So if it's something you're interested in, if you're interested in sort of the arts world in general, those artist episodes might be helpful to you. If you're interested in the college world specifically, those faculty episodes might be cool for you. So please do check that out. It's called Mapping the College Edition. You can get it on mtca.com. You also can get it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, I cannot thank you enough. I'm so glad that we got to
Thanks,
chat. It
CJ.
was so great catching up and getting to hear your story
You
after
bet.
so many years.
It's
So,
great seeing you.
yeah, it was great seeing you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye. Oh, I had such a great time getting to catch up and talk with Charlie. He is such an amazing person. It's probably been, I was a junior in high school when I did that camp, so it's been a long time. And I'm so glad that we got to catch up and talk today. You heard it from him that he knows so much about the college audition experience. So please, if you have the chance, work with Charlie. He is so nice, so amazing, and he obviously knows a lot about what goes into a good college audition and how to promote yourself in that like 5 minute audition that you have because it's not a lot of time. So be sure to talk with Charlie. Go check out his podcast. He talks with theater professionals and also he talks with people that are at the colleges as well to know what they're looking for and what they want to see in their auditions. So if you have the chance, work with Charlie. He is so amazing. And be sure to tune in next week to next week's episode. It's going to be a great one. So come back to find out where it all began.